Education Process, a Guide for Parents. This session will be presented in the requested languages of English and Spanish and will be recorded. We will begin interpretation once the slide is reviewed in the requested languages. So if you're on your computer, you're going to look for the interpretation button on your control bar. Once you click on it, pick your desired language. Then your icon should change. If you're on your phone, you're going to click on Join Audio and click Call over Internet. Click on the three dots and more. Click on Language Interpretation and click on the language you want and done. At this time, the Spanish interpreter will review the slide.
Buenas noches y bienvenidos. Para español en su computadora, busque el globo en la parte inferior, haga clic para activar y escoja español. El icono cambia a ES, que es español, y haga clic para listo. En su teléfono, haga clic para unirse al audio a través del internet. Haga clic en los tres puntitos, haga clic en interpretación, escoja español y haga clic para listo. Gracias.
Yeah. Interpretation will begin. At this time, I would like to welcome our presenter for this evening. Joining us, we have Dr. Melissa Edmonds. She is the coordinator of gifted education here in Prince William County Schools. Welcome, Melissa.
Yeah, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending this evening. Our plan tonight is to talk about the gifted identification process in Prince William County Schools. First, let me give you a little bit of context. Gifted education services are academic interventions, just like services for English language learners or for students who receive special education services. That means these are services that are provided to those students who need them, students for whom the regular classroom cannot entirely meet all of their learning needs. There are state regulations that govern our program, which you can read online, and you can also find our local plan online. It is a full description of how gifted programming in Prince William County Schools works that was approved by our school board and our superintendent. Could we go back one slide, please? Thank you. Gifted resource services are provided through a pull-out model in most cases. That means students do not go to a new school to receive their gifted resource services. They do not change to a different teacher's classroom. All of their services take place at their base school in place of some of their regular classroom instructional time. Let's talk about what we mean when we talk about giftedness. It's important to know that the definition of giftedness varies from state to state in the United States and even from school division to school division. Virginia does not have a common state definition of what giftedness is and who should be identified. That is up to each local school district. The Prince William County definition of giftedness is based on the state's definition, and you see it on the screen in front of you there. And I'd like to talk just a minute about a few parts of that definition. First, it says, could we go back, please, that students who demonstrate high levels of accomplishment or show exceptional potential beyond their age peers of similar experience or environment in one or more area. First, let me point out that this definition mentions that gifted services includes both students who are currently achieving at high levels, but it also includes those students who have the potential to do so. That is, they've demonstrated strong thinking skills that we believe could be developed and strengthened so that they can also perform at that high level of accomplishment. The second part of the definition I'd like to highlight is that it says of similar experience or environment. In Prince William County, when we identify students for giftedness, students are compared with other students in their same school building. That is the peers of similar experience or environment that the definition requires. So students are not identified at the division level. The division does not make identification decisions. The decision is made at the school level. Finally, we see the 5 areas in which students can be identified for giftedness. First, we have general intellectual aptitude. That means students who have very strong thinking skills in a variety of areas, but for whom they may not be specific skills in language or in math or in history and social studies or in science. We also can identify students who have subject-specific gifts that includes language from kindergarten through 12th grade, math also from kindergarten to 12th grade. And once students get into middle school, we can also identify them for specific academic strengths in history and social science and in science. The goal of our gifted resource services is to develop advanced thinking skills. How does a parent know if their child might benefit from receiving gifted services? On the screen, if we go back, on the screen we see some common characteristics of giftedness that parents can look for at home. Of course, we wouldn't expect any one child to display all of these characteristics, but if your student is described by 4 or 5 of these characteristics, you might consider referring them for a gifted evaluation. For example, does your child ask a lot of questions about how things work? Do they wonder what would happen if? Does your child notice details and patterns? Do they have a great memory? Do they spend a lot of time imagining things and creating things? Do they learn very quickly and can remember things with just a single exposure 1 to 2 times? Do they get wordplay like puns or sort of adult jokes? Are they great communicators? Do they love to teach themselves how to learn? Some of these things, this is not an exhaustive list, but again, if your child is demonstrating 4 or 5 of these characteristics, it might be a great idea to talk to the resource teacher at your child's school. How do students get identified for gifted services, or how do they come to the attention of the gifted program? One way in which students can be referred for gifted services is through a referral process. Anyone who knows the student and knows how they think can refer a child to their gifted committee at their school for an evaluation. That includes educational professionals like teachers. Parents are welcome to refer their students. Community members like a team coach or a church member that knows the child well. Students can even be identified by their peers, and they can even nominate themselves for an evaluation. Referrals are accepted at any time during the school year, and they can be made in several ways. Every school has a form that you can simply fill out your name and the child's name to request that evaluation. And you can also email the gifted resource teacher at your child's school, and everyone's name is listed, every resource teacher's name is listed on the Prince William County Schools website. If you don't know who that person is, their contact information is easy to find. When the gifted resource teacher receives the name of a student, either through the referral process or through a universal screening at the school level, the first step is always to contact the parents to get their permission to evaluate the child. So we send home a letter explaining that your child has been recommended for a gifted evaluation, along with the permission form. That's the green form you see here on the screen. And we also send along a parent report. The parent permission, the green form, is necessary. Nothing else happens in the evaluation process until the parents give us written permission to evaluate their child. We also send home the parent report. We ask every parent to tell us about their child and what they see at home. A lot of times children behave differently or display different interests at home than they do at school. And we want parents to give us as much information as they can about how their students like to learn when they are at home. This parent report is available in many languages, and it is available on the Prince William County website as a fillable document. And there's also a video there in multiple languages giving you more information about how to fulfill or how to fill out the form. If you have questions about that, the parent liaison at each school has received some training in helping you fill out that form, and every gifted teacher is ready and prepared to help you if you need any help with completing that paperwork. This is what the gifted education part of the Prince William County website looks like. It's a little hard to find, so I recommend just going to the Prince William County website and using the search bar and typing in the word gifted, and it will take you right to the website. You can see in the menu on the left that the contact information for the resource teacher at every school is listed there, as well as a detailed page about the identification process that shares the information I'm sharing with you tonight, as well as some additional information. There's also information there about what services look like. And there's a page of parent resources that has great books and puzzles and other activities, even some summer camp opportunities that might be great options for you to extend your students' learning. The Virginia regulations that I mentioned earlier require that the evaluation process for gifted services completes within 90 instructional days. That's 90 days of school from the time the parent returns the permission form to the child's school. We have 90 days to collect all of the information that is required. After those usually before those 90 days, but when the process has been complete and a decision has been reached, you will receive a letter in the mail to let you know whether your child has qualified for these intervention services, whether they have not qualified at this time, or whether the committee needs some additional information before they can make that decision. During the information gathering process, before the school can make their decision on the child's eligibility, the gifted resource teacher at each school collects a large body of evidence about the student. So Prince William County uses what is called a multi-criteria identification process. That means there's not a single piece of data that can identify a student for gifted services or exclude a student for gifted services. Sometimes people think that there's some sort of test the student takes, and if they pass the test, they receive gifted services. If they don't pass the test, they do not. That is false. That is not true. So the multi-criteria process involves all of the areas you see here. I'll just give you a brief overview. First, we collect aptitude test scores from each student. Those are given at the school by trained professionals. We collect information about a student's grades, their reading levels, how they've done on their SOLs if they're an older student, those sorts of academic record information pieces. Every teacher writes a classroom report about the student, telling them what they see in class, how the student compares to their peers, what kind of thinking they see. The parents are asked to offer information on their report, as I mentioned earlier. We collect samples of the student's work, their writing, their mathematical thinking, any self-initiated projects they might have been involved in. And we also conduct a student interview or a student questionnaire to ask the student what they see as their own learning strengths and why they think they would benefit from gifted resource services. So that's a lot of information for the gifted resource teacher to gather, but we want to make sure that we're leaving no stone unturned in our efforts to get a full picture of the student and their talents and abilities. Once all of the information has been collected, the profile of the student goes to the school's Identification and Placement Committee. The state regulations require that we include on the committee an administrator from the school, a professional school counselor, classroom teachers with training and working with gifted students, the gifted education resource teacher, as well as any other resource teachers that might have specific knowledge about the student. For example, if a student receives English language services, their ESOL teacher participates on the committee, or any student who has a special education designation, a special education teacher also sits in on that profile review. Once the school committee reviews all of that information and makes a decision, the folder is passed on to the division level. At the division level, we check to make sure that every school has followed the division procedures correctly and faithfully. And at that point, the case is confirmed, the decision is confirmed, and parents receive that written notification. It's important to note that if a parent were to disagree with the committee's decision or think there was something overlooked or there was more information to offer, parents can request an appeal of the committee's decision within 10 days of receiving their notification. What are the possible outcomes from the eligibility process? When you receive the letter explaining the committee's decision, you will see that one of three outcomes has been decided. First, a student might be eligible to receive these gifted services as an intervention. If that is the case, the letter will also include in what area your student's strengths were noted, whether it's a general intellectual aptitude, language, math, history and social science, or science. A second option that the letter might explain is that the student is on monitor. Monitor case means the committee has requested collection of more information before a decision can be made, and the case will be returned for evaluation once that data has been collected. The final option that you might see is that the student is not eligible for gifted services at this time. Younger students are your youngest learners, kindergarten, first, and second grade, who are found not eligible for services quite yet, but for whom the committee saw significant areas of strength, can be recommended to participate in our school division's early talent development program. That is not gifted services, but it is coordinated by the gifted resource teacher who helps the classroom teacher extend and enrich our youngest students and collect a portfolio about that students in hope that as they age a little bit and become more comfortable in school, have a little more time at school, that maybe some of those talents that we have noticed can be nurtured into qualifying for the gifted services. Students who are identified for the early talent development program come back to be reevaluated for gifted at the end of that program in third grade. How do students receive these services? How do students receive these academic interventions? Our service model in Prince William County varies a little by student grade level. In kindergarten through grades 5 at the elementary level, students receive what are called pull-out services. That means for a certain number of minutes per week, dictated by the student's grade level, students leave their regular classroom with other students in their grade that are identified for gifted services. For example, all of the third grade gifted students in the school leave their classrooms and go to the gifted room. They receive 90 minutes of gifted services and then they return to their classroom for the rest of the day. So it's a pull-out model. They don't change classes or anything like that. In grades 6 through 8, gifted services are scheduled during the encore rotation. This means in place of one of their 4 encore electives, such as art or tech ed, students can elect to receive their gifted services instead. They receive gifted services for 2 quarters of the year, usually first and third, or second and fourth. In 8th grade, not every student has an encore rotation in their schedule, so those students continue to receive services in a pull-out model. When we get to high school, the pull-out model continues, but we do have credit-bearing courses in 11th grade and 12th grade that students can take as part of a regularly scheduled day, but they take gifted services as a class if they would like to do that. So in addition to these pull-out services, gifted education resource teachers work with all the students' classroom teachers to continue to ensure that these students are challenged and extended throughout the day because they're not able to be with a gifted resource teacher every day of the week. We want to make sure they're still receiving the challenge that they require to continue moving forward in their learning. That concludes my presentation. I know Ms. Boyd has some questions that were entered through the registration form that she'd like to ask at this time. So Ms. Boyd, I'm ready to answer those questions for you.
Perfect. So some of the questions that we got, are there any resources or programs available for parents of gifted children?
Yes, in the month of May and early May, stay tuned to the Prince William County website and news posts. We are having Parent University. It will be held at the Kelly Leadership Center on a Saturday, and we have several nationally known speakers, specialists in the world of parents and gifted education coming to present for our parents. That is free and open to the public. We have one speaker coming. He will talk about twice exceptional children. We'll have another speaker coming to talk about perfectionism in gifted students. We'll have another speaker coming to talk about what it's like to be identified as a gifted student and the stresses that can put on a student. And he's actually going to present his session once in English and a second time in Spanish, so the parents will be able to come for a session there. In addition to our parent university, our parent event is held every year with different slate of speakers. The website that I mentioned does have a parent resources page, mostly filled with ideas of what parents can do to continue to extend their student at home.
Okay. Another of the questions that came up is, how are teachers trained to work with gifted students?
In Prince William County, every teacher who works with gifted students is required to complete professional development. They go to special training, at least 18 hours of professional development on how to work with gifted students, what they need academically, what they need socially, what they need emotionally, how to extend their learning, how to improve the level of depth and complexity in the classroom, how to spot them in the classroom to refer students for gifted evaluation. So, and that is, our students in the elementary level are cluster grouped, which means there's a small group of gifted students placed together in a classroom with a teacher who has been trained in working with gifted students.
Okay. Another of the questions that was asked is, how does the program address the social and emotional needs of gifted students?
The biggest way we address social emotional needs of the gifted students is bringing them all together in one place where there's sort of a comfort level involved with being with the other students who think like them. Sometimes it can be a little isolating when you're the one or two students in a classroom who have, I don't know, sometimes gifted students have unusual interests. I used to work with a second grader who was crazy about the Titanic. He knew everything about the Titanic. The other students in his class weren't interested at all. But when he came to the gifted program, he had a rapt audience who they were just as excited to learn about the Titanic as they are. The gifted resource teachers also talk to students about things like not giving up when things get challenging, and how do they advocate for themselves, and how do they reflect on what has gone well and what struggles they have encountered in their learning. So most of those social and emotional pieces happen in the gifted education resource room, but every teacher, like I mentioned before, that has the gifted training has also taken a section of the coursework is on working with the social and emotional needs that gifted students have.
Perfect. We also had another one. How can parents be involved in supporting their gifted child's education?
My biggest advice there would be to follow the lead of your student. If your student has a particular passion or an interest in a particular subject area, take them to the library and help them find books about that subject. Or maybe you can help them find some child appropriate YouTube videos that explain more about that subject. Maybe you can work with them if they're very interested in I don't know, writing or something. Maybe you can help find a project for them to work on or encourage that in them. So mainly following a student's lead, helping them learn how to learn on their own rather than someone teaching them. How do you find a great website? How do I find a good book? How do I think about those? And then having those dinner table conversations. If your child is an avid reader, for example, talking to them about the book and not just who were the main characters and what was the setting, but how did you feel about that book? What did the author, what feelings do you think the author was trying to get you to experience? It's really that deep conversation about what they're learning and what they're interested in is the best way to support the students at home. Sometimes parents think they need to push the student ahead in grade level. Let's say a second grader, we need to teach them third grade math. That's not always necessary. It depends on the student. I really would rather have a parent support what the child's current interest is. And with gifted students, sometimes that changes with the breeze. This week it's the Titanic, and next week it's dinosaurs, and the week after that it's World War II or something, but the much as a parent can support, your local public library is a great resource for those sorts of things.
Okay. How does the program prepare students for future academic and career success?
When students are in elementary school, it's a little harder to see that connection, but in the elementary program, the thinking skills that we focus on critical thinking, creative thinking, collaboration, communication, and conceptual thinking. Now you'll notice that on that list was not more advanced math and more advanced language arts. We do work with more advanced math and more advanced language arts, but our goal is to teach the students the foundational deep thinking skills that cross all disciplines. Every discipline uses creative thinking. Every discipline uses critical thinking. So we're trying to develop these habits in the students. We're trying to encourage them to learn on their own, how to learn on their own. So when they get to middle school, for example, they're prepared for extended coursework. And we'll continue to build on that foundation in middle school, and that prepares them for the advanced course sequence when they get to high school. With the support of the gifted resource teacher at the high school level, talking with the students, helping them map out their career goals and what courses that means they'll need to take in high school. The gifted resource teacher sits down with the high school students and plans. It's called a services plan, where they sort of map out your goal is to be a doctor. Here are the classes that will set you up for entry into college. These are the kind of things you should be looking for. So we have this sort of advising component that comes in the high school, along with the advanced level coursework.
I believe you touched up on this one, but one of the questions that parent had is, are gifted students taken to a class at their particular school, or is it at a different school? I believe you touched up on this.
Yes, every school has their own gifted resource teacher, and services take place at that child's school. Some of our bigger schools even have more than one, but every school has at least one gifted resource teacher. No student has to change schools or even travel to a school and then back to their base school. Everyone receives their services at their base school, which is great because that means the gifted resource teacher gets to know the student in a much different way when they're a part of the school community, when they're both part of the same school community and they can see each other frequently every day.
Great. And then this is my last question. It says, how do I know if my child is gifted?
We don't know for sure, and there's no real test that you can take to make sure your child is gifted or not. The best we can say is we think your child would benefit from the services that we have to offer. So without necessarily saying the child is gifted, we want to say we think your child would benefit from some additional extension and enrichment in the school environment. The website, the Prince William County website, I mentioned, shares some very common characteristics of gifted students, even a more detailed list than what I shared in the presentation this evening. I would encourage you to check that out. They're very, again, sort of cross-subject skills. They're not necessarily how you identify a super strong mathematician. It's more like what kind of questions do they ask, those sorts of things. You do not have to be sure that your child is gifted to recommend them for an evaluation. It's just as much as could we see if my child may benefit from this as it is just a confirmation of something we already know. So even if you're not 100% sure, you think your child might benefit from these services, reach out to your school's gifted resource teacher and they'd be happy to talk with you about that.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Edmonds, for joining
You're
us
welcome.
today. This session, again, was recorded, and I will send a follow-up email to all who registered. I'll send Dr. Edmonds' contact information if you have any additional questions. I will also make sure to include a link to the website where, she was just talking about if you think your child may be gifted, or if you just want to look at, what are some of the characteristics, you'll have those resources there as well. And so we have placed the survey for today's session in the chat. We ask that you just take a couple of minutes to fill that out. Let us know how we're doing, and then give us some feedback on the type of programming that you want to see in the future. So thank you again, Dr. Edmonds, and I hope
Thank you.
everyone has a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.